Hey kids, howdy and welcome. It is time again for your latest episode of Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. It is Monday, February 24th. By the end of the week, we will be in March. Things are going to heat the fuck up.
And we're well into Pisces season, right?
Yeah, we moved into Pisces season a little early this year on the 18th. And in fact, I would say being in the Pisces mansion is probably the nicest element of the month because at least we have direct connection to the sort of beautiful, dreamy oneness, compassion, sensibility that Pisces brings. But this is the week that Mars goes direct. There's a new moon. Mercury starts his shadow. Venus turns around. It's a crazy week. So we got lots to talk about today, but let's start, as we always do, with a question. This actually comes from Skylar from Instagram, and I don't know that Skylar didn't even know I had a podcast.
Instagram question.
Right. Skylar didn't even know that I have a podcast because when they asked this question, my response was, hey, do you listen to my podcast? Because rather than, I would never answer a question this detailed in a social media post, but I can talk about it here. So here we go. Skylar from Instagram writes, could you make a video on the use of modern outer planets, Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, and why you use them in your practice versus only traditional planets? Just curious. Thanks for your wisdom. Skylar from Instagram. I love this question because it gives me the opportunity to talk about something in the world of astrology that I feel really strongly about, which is we are living in a consciousness that expands and has expanded mightily since the sort of Hellenistic days 500 years ago in astrology, where we hadn't discovered Neptune, Uranus, or Pluto. And so when Skylar says the traditional planets, that's what they're referring to, the idea that astrology could not work with planets it had not yet discovered. So for whatever reason, Hellenistic astrology is making a little bit of a comeback right now. And so there are a lot of teachers out there that are exposing people to the equal signs of Hellenistic astrology, only focusing on the traditional planets. And there are other aspects of ancient astrology that I think should not be in consideration anymore because the human organism has evolved so much. So let's take it just from the question, which is about the planets. For thousands and thousands of years, astrology could only work with planets that were visible to the naked eye. Right. And so there became an astrology that reflected that level of human intelligence, of human interaction, and the world as it was 500 years ago. So for my money, if we discover a planet and a new planet becomes part of the collective consciousness's awareness of the universe, that astrology must, absolutely must include the human consciousness expansion into the world of astrology. So that for me, it's a natural evolution of astrology on the planet that every time we expand our scientific awareness, we need to funnel that into our archetypal understanding that astrology offers. Let's just look at Neptune as an example. Neptune rules the unconscious mind. Well, we didn't know what the freaking unconscious mind was until the middle of last century.
Right.
So 500 years ago, when we didn't have a Neptune, we didn't even have an unconscious. We didn't, right? So we expand scientifically, and that funnels into the archetypal interpretation of the mystery of being here. I mean, Pluto's not even considered a planet anymore. But if I sat with a naysayer in astrology and had their chart and just took them through some of their Pluto transits in their life, they'd be hard-pressed to say, no, what you're talking about didn't happen in 1975 when Pluto was over your moon. So to me, the vibrancy of what we've discovered is just as valid as the thousands of years of tradition when we only worked with the visible planets. So I have a real bee in my bonnet about this whole idea that we have to adhere to the ancient traditions when the ancient traditions don't take into consideration that we are not operating at the place we were 500 years ago.
Well, it's like the Bible scripture that people like to talk about that's just so has nothing to do with anything today, you know?
That's right. Exactly right. That's actually a perfect example. The Bible says we should own people, but that doesn't work today. Right. And so, modern people just say, oh, well, we ignore that. And it's like, that's what I think we should be doing with astrology. My favorite way to describe this as a frustration is in the idea of what's called cazimi and combust, two ancient astrological expressions that relate to what we thought here on the planet when a passing planet transited in front of the sun. We would call that combust. So the notion was, if a planet was near the sun, that planet's consciousness gets eradicated, gets burned up, gets untouchable, because the light of the sun, the fire of the sun, is burning it up. Well, that makes perfect sense for 500 years ago when you looked up at the sun and then you couldn't see the planet anymore. It's like, wow, that sun's really bright. It must be burning up, Mercury who's in front of it. So that's called combust. I don't think that's accurate for today. We've been to the sun. We have photographed planets in front of it. It's not combust. We can see it now because it's not 500 years ago. So combust needs to be eradicated because it isn't the case that a planet burns out of consciousness when it's near the sun. It's actually just a gathering between that planet's consciousness and our conscious awareness. So the opposite of combust is this, I don't know if it's the opposite, but the counterpoint to combust is this thing called cazimi. I have never heard an astrologer that's talked about cazimi that has actually described it correctly or accurately. They all just use it as a synonym for combust. If you don't want to know what I'm talking about, go to social media feeds when a planet is conjunct the sun, and you'll see all of these people yelling the word cazimi, cazimi, cazimi. But what cazimi has nothing to do with the conjunction of the sun and the planet. It's a tiny swath of space in what's called the heart of the conjunction, the center of the conjunction, where in this 17-minute space, we're talking about space, not time, so not minutes of time, but minutes of space. A minute is 1/60th of a degree. So if you can identify the timing of when said planet is in the 17-minute space, that's cazimi. And so if you were using that in the old days, the queen or the king might be told to do this thing on that Thursday because of cazimi. This one little moment when the planet's not burned up by the sun, but is thought to be presented to us with more clarity. That to me sounds like a lot of bullshit because combust isn't a real thing. Why would cazimi be? And I've never again heard anybody use cazimi outside of it being just a synonym for conjunction, which it's not. So to wrap up and reiterate, I believe that as we expand consciousness, there's a part of our consciousness that's way out there in the solar system beyond us, Voyager. That means the human organism has now reached beyond our own solar system in terms of how we understand our place in the universe. Astrology is designed to help us understand our place in the universe. So astrology has to keep up with science and technology. There you have it. All right, we got a lot to cover this weekend, so let's just start with what's happening today. Mars is going direct. Now, Mars has been at 17 degrees of Cancer for 2 weeks, and he'll be at 17 degrees of Cancer for another 10 days or more. That's called a station. So if you've been feeling some kind of way or bumping into shit, or like me, I've been dropping things left, right, and center because my natal Mars is 17 Libra, and so Mars at 17 Cancer is in a 4-week square. So I'm so grateful for Mars turning around because we've been in the below with our physical experience. Now, we talk about Mars and decisions and masculine principle and taking action and goals and ambitions and work, but Mars is also just the physical body. So with Mars retrograde the last bunch of weeks, so many people have been talking about tiredness and headaches. And while have enormous chronic fatigue, so I'm always fucking tired, but I have been way more tired with Mars retrograde. And so you may feel a certain shift, maybe not today when it turns around. It might take a few days, but there should absolutely be some movement and comfort in the body as the planet that reflects our physical bodies turns around. Now, again, he's stationed, which means the perception from our awareness is that he ain't moving. So that stays the same. It's like back to the ancients. When the ancients looked up during the loop of retrograde, this moment would not appear from our view that Mars is moving at all, even though he's turned around. So it's great that we know the date when it's happening so that we can work with it in a more specific way. But here's the moment when he turns around. You might feel a little squirrely yesterday, today, tomorrow. I know that I sometimes feel a kind of general crankiness when Mercury stations and turns direct. More so for me that when he slows down to go retrograde, it's when he's turning around to go direct that I feel a little cranky. So if you're feeling a little some way, know that Mars' station and turnaround might be part of that. And then we get to follow the wrapping up portion of Mars' retrograde cycle. So he turns around today, but the traversing over the same territory goes all the way till May 1st. Now, one of the things that's interesting about that is that Mercury and Venus and their retrogrades that are upcoming are playing a really dynamic role in our integration of heart and mind over the next couple of months. And the fact that Mars is still in his shadow during their retrogrades does sort of overlap the experience of mind, heart, and body are all being rewired in huge ways as we enter this year. You mentioned the Pisces mansion at the top of the episode, Zoe, and with the sun in the Pisces mansion, our conscious awareness is now in the territory that Neptune, Saturn, retrograding Venus, and Mercury will all be activating over the next couple of months. So we are not out of the complications of a really challenging first half of the year because personal planet retrogrades are discombobulating to us, but they're oh so helpful in helping us meet the demands of our lives and the world and the state of the world right now. And so while they're bumpy and uncomfortable, they're important. And we have been changed in how we inhabit our decision-making, goals, etc., blah, 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 all the Mars stuff. And between now and May 1st, we're wrapping it up and integrating what we learned into how we behave and move our walk through life. And this is just a fascinating midpoint moment for Mars. And it's ironic that the moment he turned around is like the same week that Mercury starts his shadow and Venus turns around.
This is quite crazy.
No, it's a bumpy week, kids, and it's a bumpy week on a personal level. So my message to you, and I'll reiterate this at the end of the episode, is that we're not in big picture land this month. We're in the very personal, well, this month, I mean this week, we're in a very personal experience of mind heart, and body, all sort of in process while we jump into the new moon that's coming this week. So yes, this is a fascinating week that will play out very much at the individual level rather than me giving you some broad sweeping, here's how you're all going to be feeling. The opposite would be true. You're each going to be feeling your mind, heart, and body in process, depending on where you're at in your journey. And all of this energy is being funneled in to Thursday's new moon in Pisces. This is a very dreamy, yummy energy. Pisces is that already. That's the nature of Pisces. I think one of the reasons why this is, it's a good moment to sort of point this out, because Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac and therefore contains all of the wisdom of the first 11 signs. And it's a mutable water sign, which means it's the deepest in our emotional consciousness, which means unconscious. Pisces contains the everything, but in a formless state. This is the beauty of the birth canal of the zodiac, is that Pisces is formless and Aries invented form. And so that passage between the last and the first sign of the zodiac is where we rebirth ourselves. And if you've been following along this year, that point, last Pisces, first Aries, is so rich and juicy this year. And so this last opportunity to set intentions, to dial in your spiritual practice as front and center is part of this new moon's power. If you don't put your practice first, I don't know how you're going to make it through the next 2 years. That's the real message here for me, just as a person in a body, inspiring other people to have a more graceful experience of being in your body. To me, the message is dial it in now. And if you don't feel like you've been disciplined enough, use this new moon to dive more deeply into, I put my spiritual connection first. It's kind of just like saying I lead with love and forgiveness, which means that if I'm leading with love and forgiveness and somebody or something comes at me harsh, I'm going to respond through love and forgiveness first, even if I'm triggered or bothered by what's going on. Very difficult to do in the world as it is right now. And I'm going to say this all year. If Kamala Harris had been elected president, we would be in a kumbaya moment where we would have to learn how to have the hard conversation so that two sides of a polarization can somehow melt and blend. And now we're in the Gordian knot period of time, which means we ain't going to make it unless we cut that Gordian knot, which means activated change. And that's what this summer and next year is going to be all about. I don't mean to fearmonger, and I hope this doesn't feel like fearmongering. It's not. It's really just like, hey, kids, the house is on fire. And the first thing you want to do is connect to the waters of your spiritual connection. Saturn is not too far away in Pisces, so he's demanding it. Saturn says in Pisces, put your spiritual practice first. Lots of other astrologers might talk about boundarylessness and, not being motivated enough. Saturn's about discipline and motivation. Pisces is formless. I speak with the language of psychology and me putting my spiritual practice first, because if I didn't do that, I don't think I'd be here. So Saturn's closeness to the new moon means it's important. Set the intentions. Mercury is right next door, 24 degrees of Pisces, and is splitting the difference between Saturn at 20 and the North Node at 27. So if Saturn and the North Node are both near each other, that means that the zeitgeist of where we're going next, North Node, has this tremendous importance to it, because Saturn saying you must, Mercury saying I can, my perceptions are right there, and I'm about to go retrograde, so I'll help download this idea into consciousness. Neptune at 28 Pisces is just our spiritual consciousness getting ready to go into Aries, the sign of war this summer. And so again, it's never been more important as individuals to say, who do I want to be in the world that's changing, that needs my help? And then let me underpin that voice or vision or that activation that might be nascent in you, and put your spiritual practice first. Put love and compassion first, but don't put down the sword. We're going to need it. The full moon of the last lunar cycle that this new moon ends had Uranus in a direct T-square. And I mean, I don't know about you, but man, that full moon kicked every ass in my neighborhood, including my own. Uranus is playing a part in the Pisces stellium and the south node of the moon, which means that this new moon has sort of trajectory. It has legs. It has dynamism to move forward. So if Uranus, the great awakener, is working in a perfect sextile, perfect productive energy with Neptune in the north node, our future movement guided by spirit with our voices in tow and our do the right thing with Saturn, is sextiling the planet that can make sudden changes, and it's trining the south node of the moon. That's where we hold our past, and Uranus is like the lightning flash that in this new moon and the lunar cycles ahead says we can drop past limits, past fears, past, oh, I can't do this sensibilities, and let them go because you trust that what will come when you dial into spirit, navigating your new choices and intentions. The energy of the solar system is saying it can be instantaneous in terms of sudden shifts and changes. Of course, with all the personal planets in retrograde, everything and anything that happens through lunations is subject to layering in the clarity that might have come earlier, but will come in layers over the next few weeks and months as these personal planet retrogrades play out. But it's important to note that Pisces stellium is in a trine with Mars. That means that the guidance energy of this new moon goes straight into our embodiment so that we can walk our walk, touching the talk energy that Mercury in Pisces near this new moon is facilitating. I love that Mars turned around on Monday so that we have these couple of days of his station and this notion of his actually facing forward, even if he's not moving very fast. Everything that we intend in this new moon will be funneled right into our embodiment and help us layer by layer over the rest of the sort of winter into early spring. We will feel very, very different in our individual embodiment when we get to the summer, when the shit hits the fan. Trust that. And set your intentions in this new moon to be willing to help, to carry the sword, but bring love and compassion with you as the lead. Mercury's retrograde shadow, the first act of his 3 acts of a retrograde, starts on Friday. So Friday the 28th, Mercury will be at 26 degrees of Pisces. And just like Venus will, Mercury, the mind and perceptions, who's right now immersed in the waters of connection and the unconscious, and Mercury's not very happy here. It's too much deep water for his precision. But he will move into Aries as part of his retrograde shadow. So you really, really want to be paying attention between Friday and March 14th. Like, remember that date because the time between this end of this week and March 14th, not only do you need to pay attention because you need to pay attention to all Mercury retrograde shadows so that when he turns around, you're in a better shape to sort of know what's coming, but it's going to be really important to pay attention to the shift you experience in your mind, in your perceptions as Mercury crosses into Aries during his shadow. So I'll mention this again, of course, when it happens on March 3rd, which is the release date of our next episode. Just in case I forget, pay attention between now. Pay extra attention on like March 2nd, 3rd, 4th as Mercury's going to cross that sensitive point. And then just know he will turn around on the 14th, and then for the rest of the month and the first week of April, he is backward moving. And similar to the interpretation that I'm going to give to every planet that's crossing between Aries and Pisces, and then back again, is it's about birthing a new consciousness for us as individuals so that we can fight the good fight. Aries wants to fight. Pisces says we love, and there is no division. But we're not in a place where we can lean into that. We gotta unravel the blocks to love. And again, that's gonna require Alexander and his sword to get rid of the Gordian knot we have found ourselves in. But I'm repeating myself, so let me just sort of finish up. Friday, Mercury starts his station. Pay attention. So we start the new month on Saturday. So here's the moment when I really sort of dial in and say, March is going to be a hard month. First of all, this is an important new moon this week, but the full moon that's coming is the first of our eclipses.
Okay.
That alone, any month with an eclipse in it is a harder month. So there's one in March, there's one in April. All of the retrogrades kick in. And then there's an Aries new moon at the end of this cycle that's got some of the ingresses that are big. So make no mistake about it, that full moon behind us was the last epic sort of big energy we had to move through. And I would say that the second half of March is going to be where it gets really activated, but the new moon this week says we're in the cycle. And of course, the month starts Saturday, March 1st, with Venus turning around and going retrograde. So if we look at the week we're in, I just think it's a wild synchronicity that Mars and Mercury and Venus hit major moments in each of their respective retrograde cycles, all within the same week. In terms of the week ahead, Mars is moving so slowly, there's not going to be much to talk about in terms of his wrap-up. The Mercury retrograde shadow that starts on Friday also doesn't need much of our attention other than making note of any communication breakdowns that start, Friday and over the weekend, because they'll be part of your retrograde experience if something should, if you should cross a bump in the communication road Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. But the Venus turnaround is significant because Venus rules our emotional body. So there are ways that we have been feeling over the last bit of time, end of January, all of February, through March 1st, this weekend, has given you some of the clues about what might happen now that Venus is turning around. So you definitely want to glance back, even if you just think of February, right? It was January 27th when the shadow started with Venus, in her exalted place in Pisces. She loves it there. Then she moved into Aries, and now she's in a place she hates. And what is she doing on Saturday? She's saying, holy shit. This is too much fire. We got to go back into the waters of Pisces, get reconnected with love and forgiveness, so that when we get back into Aries, sometime between, late April and early May, we are changed in how we are living in our hearts. Venus and Mercury will both be entering the sign of war, as will Saturn and Neptune this spring and summer. So I think the Venus retrograde is almost the most important of the three. I don't really mean that. That's bullshit. They're all important. Because without a Mars retrograde, how are we going to walk our walk in a higher fashion? Without a Mercury retrograde, how are we going to perceive the world in a manner that helps us be in it, not quite of it, but make change? The Venus retrograde is how we're going to feel in our hearts along the way. And I think that the year ahead, especially summer and next year as well, if we don't have our perceptions aligned with seeing love and spirit first before we aggressively move out with our loud and activated voices, we'll use our voices for worse, not better. But personally, like waking up in the morning in your little body, if your heart is too fired up and angry, you won't be as effective out there with your activated voice. It's like I'm now talking about this in earnest in every opportunity that it makes sense to talk about get activated in whatever that means for you. And Aries is the sign of action and activation. But there's no mistaking the order of the zodiac, kids. And even though I'm going to say, pick up your swords and get ready to cut the Gordian knot, if we don't do that from love and forgiveness and empathy and a sense that there's only one of us here, then our Aries fire will be misdirected. So this is the opportunity of three personal planets all going retrograde, connecting to water first and then fire. So now we're telling a beautiful story where we are going to allow our minds to know love and oneness and then fire up our voices to create change. We're going to feel in our hearts the never-ending connection of love is love is love is love, but then we're going to allow ourselves to get fired up and in the name of love, activate. And Mars in Cancer, moving into Leo, then back to Cancer, is our very embodiment, saying, I'm fired up, I'm ready to go out there and center myself and be powerful in my creative expressions and help the world. But Mars knew better. Mars said, oh, you don't know enough about fucking self-care. You better go back into that Cancer mansion and learn a little bit more about how to be with your body in a healing, nurturing, sacred, and nourishing way so that you could go out there and be activated with a walk that's ready to be as big as your talk. Have at it. We need you.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show.
This week we have a call-in dreamer from Montana. Hey, McKenna, what you dreaming?
Hey, Michael. Hey, Zoe. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah.
I dreamt this in January, so I wrote it down. I'll just read it to you guys because I'm kind of forgetful. Um, so the world was kind of unraveling around me. It was like very apocalyptic.
Mm.
And there's just chaos everywhere, like people running on the streets, fires, people scattered everywhere. Kind of just felt like war.
Ah.
And like amidst all of it, I was safe. I was home, but it wasn't a home that I recognized in any way. It was kind of like a dark, um, like in
Hmm.
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, kind of like that.
Ooh. The
I
home
was
of the nephew, the boy.
just, yeah, but like it was that setting, but it
Yeah.
wasn't.
Beautiful.
It wasn't the
No,
same
no, I got it.
thing.
I wanted to make sure I was in the right scene and
Yeah,
not the factory, but
yeah.
in the right. Got it. A little squalor, yeah, got it.
Yeah. And I was with my mom, and I was super thankful because at the time I was bedridden. Um, and I had an illness that kept me from going outside and being exposed to everything that was going on. And despite all of this, I knew, and like there was war, but I knew that I needed to go to the hospital because I needed surgery done on both of my feet. My
Ooh.
mother got in the
What? Wait.
car,
Feet? Both of your feet
feet, both of my feet.
needed surgery. All right. I love this. I can't wait.
So my mom, she was driving me to the hospital. There was people pounding on the windows of the car. She was just, unflappable. She's just driving. We made our way. And then the dream kind of jumps to being in the actual surgery room. The room was very similar to surgery rooms we see. It was
Yeah.
bright, ethereal, illuminated. Everything felt really clear and very real. And like I was there. It was such a realistic dream. And then as I was lying on the bed, two angels appeared beside me. They weren't doctors, nor do they seem entirely human. They were more like luminous beings with an undeniable sense of purpose. I wasn't afraid of them. I was really comforted by them and I trusted them. And then behind me was a dark figure trying to administer anesthesia, but it didn't work. And I
Ha
remained fully
ha
conscious.
ha.
And the angels then went to work with scalpels, like not really
Uh-huh.
quite scalpels, more like these fine silver, pretty little tools, which probably is a scalpel, but they're working with tools and with like a very, they knew what they were doing and they took
Yeah.
off the bottoms of my feet. Um, I didn't
Well,
feel any pain.
yep.
It was only
Huh.
relief. It kind of felt like when you have a dried face mask and you peel it
Mm.
off and it's just
Mm-hmm.
like all one. My feet then they were raw. They were just these red raw soles of my
Mm.
feet, but they weren't bleeding at all. And the exposed tissue is red, alive, but not wounded. And then I wrote it pulse with energy rather than injury. The moment the last piece was removed, I was free. I rose from the operating table, but instead of stepping forward, I floated, my body unburdened, lifted effortlessly into the air. The bright room faded around me and ascended into pure whiteness, endless, infinite, and weightless. And then I woke up.
Mm. First of all, I want that dream. I want that dream. So mom brought you to the hospital. Did she disappear at that point
Yep,
or
she was gone. Just the
okay?
driver.
So this may be an interesting question for me to ask considering the chitty chat before we
Hmm.
started recording. How would you describe your mom's sort of influence on your spiritual journey?
That's a great question. It was pretty huge. We have some kind of a connection that like she's more than my mom and like it's kind of
Yeah,
this
yeah,
unparalleled, like I'm
yeah.
in some ways her mom, in some ways
Mhm,
in other ways she's my mom, and we've kind
mm,
of walked through a lot of fire together. um, and like held each other's hands through. She, at many times in my life, could have cut me out for my decisions, and she's always been that person that's been an unwavering stone. So
You
we
yeah.
both have kind of grown in
You
faith
know,
together.
the words that people choose to say count. Like, so if I'm
Hmm.
talking to you and this is a sacred conversation about like me interpreting your unconscious through the dream, I get to do that with what you say to me. So when
Hmm.
you tell me that your mother and you have walked through fire, wouldn't walking through fire, and I don't mean in real life
Oh,
but walking through fire would burn the soles of your feet
it
so that you would
certainly
cut
would.
them off and have a brand new, fresh, yes?
Yep.
So,
Oh,
like, you just
absolutely.
can't make this shit up when we, just sort of extemporaneously share and someone in the room can read that.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yep.
so the reason I ask about that has to do with the prominence of your feet in the dream
Uh-huh.
because Pisces rules the feet.
Hmm.
There's an cat, if you go through the zodiac order and start at the top of the head, the signs move downwards where, Aries is the head, Taurus is the throat, et cetera, et
Hmm.
cetera. So you're moving down the body as you go through the signs. And at Pisces, it's about the feet.
Right.
It's why the washing the feet of Jesus or Jesus washing
Oh,
the feet of someone else is a beautiful Piscean image. That's why there's fishermen connected with Jesus. That's
right.
why there's little fish on the back of some people's cars connected to their Christian
Wow.
sensibility. So now we have to break the fourth wall a little bit and know that I did not know what we were dreaming about, but I do know that your mom started out as a Christian
Yeah.
and kind of,
Yep.
sort of, so did you.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And what did you say to me about how it's sort of coming together now?
Now it's just that we hold this space for one another, that I honor her traditional beliefs and she honors my more, I don't really, I believe that there's everything that people can believe all lead to the
Yeah.
same thing
Yes, because
ultimately.
that is the truth of it, is that all roads lead to God. And the problem with
Hmm.
Christianity is this hubristic idea that no, only one, and I'm right and you're wrong,
Right.
which
Yep.
is ludicrous just on the face of it, because like, how could that be?
Right.
Right? Okay, because it's not. So
Right.
we start your dream in both a sense of your change, your transformation.
Hmm.
Apocalyptic scenarios means that the old is dying. And what's not said is that there's a new beginning, but maybe not quite yet, because we're in the fires part and the war part.
Yeah.
So the fact that you're home and safe
Hmm.
does suggest that you have some sense of psyche in you that's going to allow you, that is allowing you and will continue to allow you to be in the world and not of it. We
Hmm.
already know that to be so because your dream story told us that.
Right.
So the surgery that's required right now isn't about how can I just be in the war. It's like it's telling you already are, you're doing it well, you're feeling safe in your own self.
Hmm.
But it's dark.
Hmm.
It's not all it can be. So there is a transformation being asked of you that even though you feel safe, that's not enough.
No.
You need something else. And, I'm going to project this onto you. I'm going to say it's you activated in the world as it is right now,
Right.
grounded, walking a walk that is pure, more true, supported by spirit,
Hmm.
that the anesthesia is the shadow.
Yeah.
The shadow says, I don't want to feel any of this. Give me my escapism.
Yeah.
But no, it didn't work, right? So and listen, nothing wrong with escapism. 3 or 4 o'clock every afternoon, I'm high on weed. So that's my form of escapism after being at service all day. And I have no shame about that because I want some escapism too. And I get to have it because I'm also responsible to who I am. And so we all must know that as well.
Right.
But for the sake of the symbolic transformation, it isn't about staying deeply asleep from outside means,
Hmm.
anesthesia, that it's about connecting to spirit, walking your walk, getting rid of that old layer of the fires you have walked through before, and
Right.
then recalibrating your walk, profoundly carried by
Mhm.
spirit. Wow. I love this dream so much, McKenna. And you
Thank
had this, you
you.
said this was recent. It was just in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. It was January like 28th or 29th.
How are you viewing what's happening? Like, how is it for you as an individual up there in Montana, having an experience of the world and our country changing around you? Like, what do you think what is this dream telling you about your sort of next steps?
Yeah, the astrology this year is insane.
Yeah.
And although, like, for a lot of people, there's a lot of fear that comes along with that change, I'm
Yeah.
really excited about it because it
Mm.
needs to happen.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I feel like there's a
Yes.
lot that, raised religious, raised around a family that really conforms to being religious for like getting their money, getting their inheritance. And I've
Mm-hmm.
always been the type to be like, I don't believe in that. I want to say what I want to do and
Yeah.
do what I want to do. And I've just had this push to kind of bring that spiritual community to Bozeman. It's just it's here, but it's hidden, and I just kind of feel like whatever it is, the higher sense of power is saying you need to strip off
Yeah.
your old wounds,
That's
your
right.
old trauma, and not live by it, and
That's
be
right.
able to shine your light
That's right.
to
Yeah.
people or
Even
even make
that
friends. Yeah.
language, McKenna, the idea of like wounds guiding you, we
Mm-hmm.
all walk from our wounds
Mm-hmm.
until we loosen them up enough to contain and love them. And then we might
Yeah.
still feel the wounds, but we don't have to behave from them.
Totally.
And
Yep.
that's, I think, what's part of what's happening. It's not like the past is like no longer able to bother you if you want to dive there and think about it and be there. But the dream is saying that you've risen up to a higher level where you're not walking your walk from a wounded space, but
Right.
walking your walk from a supported space through spirit. And thank God you're up there in Bozeman. This is what I'm talking about like, and when I say Gordian knot, I don't mean we have to blow it up, but it's going to reflect your language with it has to happen. That's what I
It
mean
does.
by Gordian knot. It's not like
Mm-hmm.
we passed the point of we could negotiate out of it. Now we're in the place where we just have to change everything.
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
my vision for peace for humanity includes human beings like you learning where your ministry is and stepping into it powerfully, whether it's to
Mm-hmm.
influence 3 people, 30, 300, 3,000, 300,000, or 3 million in Bozeman. Have at it. We need you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you both.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.